growing up in Indiana, northern Indiana, I grew up around a lot of Amish people, and they are not perfect, of course, but they're very gentle people. They're pacifists, of course, so they don't fight in any kind of military conflict or anything like that. There are no real worries among the Amish, not just because they're gentle people, but because they have each other. In 2006, I remember hearing the story of a man named Charles Roberts, a man who probably had some mental problems, went into a one-room Amish schoolhouse and shot and killed 5 girls before taking his own life. And there was outrage across the nation because it's not as though this school had done anything to anybody, let alone Charles Roberts. The outcry in the nation was what a horrible thing. This person, his family, everyone should pay for this. But the Amish reacted very differently. They immediately forgave Charles Roberts, and they even showed up at his funeral and put their arms around his widow and donated money to help her in the ongoing expenses. Totally the opposite of what most of the world was upset about. Professor Stephen Nolt in the Goshen News said this: "They did not convert their grief and shock into calls for retribution. True, the killer was dead, but the Amish did not engage in the most common form of revenge we see in contemporary society, attacking his character or degrading his memory. While other neighbors said that they hoped he was enjoying burning in hell, the Amish said that they trusted he had met a merciful God. Nor did they ever imply that his apparent mental illness was evil or a moral failing, again as some others did. Instead, they sought to treat him as a fellow human being, troubled to be sure, but one whose memory warranted respect and whose survivors needed love and compassion." You think about that, and you probably wonder in and of yourself, could I have that reaction? Could I have that if it happened to me? Most of us, even thinking about something like that, respond naturally with anger. And we imagine ourselves being angry and maybe even hateful or bitter for the rest of our lives. I have a pretty good imagination, and I've thought about what I would say. You see videos about people that, the mothers that go to someone's sentencing trial, and generally the family of the victim are allowed to say something in the sentencing trial, and it's heartbreaking to hear what some families have to say to the person who murdered their daughter or their son. And I always kind of wonder what I would say. I would like to say that I would act like the Amish, because that is the way Christ would have us to act. I suspect that I would be really tempted to shout at them and to let them know what I really thought of what kind of person they were. But if I was going to reflect Christ, I would probably be forced to say something like, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." We are called as Christians to reconcile, to forgive, to love, and to refuse to retaliate. 1 Thessalonians is written to a church that's growing and trying to navigate even what they suspect is going to come soon. It hasn't yet, of course, but the end times. They're thinking about at the end, and they're thinking maybe even about what's going to happen to their persecutors. And one key to do this is the church. So he says in chapter 5, verse 11, "Wherefore comfort yourselves together and edify one another, even as you do." Verse 14, "Now we exhort you, brethren, warn them that are unruly, comfort the feeble-minded, support the weak, be patient toward all men." So he's talking about how do we navigate some of the tough times. We need the church. And then he says in verse 15, "See that none render evil for evil unto any man, but ever follow that which is good, both among yourselves and to all men." That word "see that" starts off this verse means to watch over. It's the same idea as a bishop or someone who takes oversight. Hey, watch yourself. Be careful that you don't have the wrong attitude, but that you have the right attitude. Hybert says this about this verse, about this phrase: "The aorist tense indicates that they must constantly be on their guard, that there may not occur a single instance of anyone paying back evil for evil." It was a call to reflect Christ when they were wronged. which will happen in your life. You will be wronged. You will be tempted to say, oh yeah? Well, here comes what you deserve, evil for evil. What should be our attitude and reaction when we are wronged? Now, here's the problem. I think if I just said, now I'm going to just cover up this passage, I'm going to cover up my notes, what do you think we should do? Isn't it true that most of us know the right answer? Sunday school kids know the right answer. So none of this, what I'm going to say, is informative. Hopefully it's exhortative, where I can exhort you to take on this attitude. The first one is do not retaliate. Do not retaliate. We cannot avoid evil in the world. We are going to have it, and especially evil from others. There's, of course, natural evil, tornadoes, hurricanes, blizzards, all those kinds of things. But then we have moral evil, people doing evil to one another. And it's perfectly fine to ask in some ways, why does God allow bad things to happen like tornadoes and windstorms and fires and those kinds of things that no one had any kind of moral agency to it? But then we get the question more likely, more often than not, and the thing that I think really grieves us is that there's moral evil in the world, that people hurt people, and that people want to do things to other people that are really, really wrong. And then sometimes those people that want to do something wrong to them want to do something wrong to us as well. And there are a spectrum of ways that we're wrong. Sometimes people want to do evil. There are such things as murderers and rapists and kidnappers out there, and they are looking for more evil to do. What Proverbs says, they imagine evil. They think about the next evil thing they can do. There are people like that. Thankfully, not everybody. Thankfully, not most, but there are people like that. And there are some people who wrong us because they're just being selfish. The scammers and thieves and liars. They're not necessarily wanting to hurt you or really anybody. If they could get what they could get without hurting people, they'd be fine, but they can't, so sometimes they have to hurt people and steal their money. Sometimes there are people just being careless. They didn't mean to, but they did it. Probably those are most of the people that you're going to encounter. They didn't mean to hurt you. They were just being really, really careless, and they said what they said. They did what they did. They acted in such a way that hurt you, but maybe they weren't necessarily trying to. And then sometimes there are just misunderstandings among family members. And in any of those cases, there's an offense. There's maybe a sin against you and a chance for you to think, I am hurt. What can I do about it? You cannot help being wronged. It's going to happen. People are going to sin against you. In macro, micro, everywhere in between, people are going to sin against you. And you can't help that. You can't stop that. It'd be great if you could, but you can't. But you can handle and deal with your response when you are sinned against. To avoid conflict is to avoid people. You cannot live that way. So what do we do when the conflict comes? We respond in a Christ-like way. He says, see that none render evil for evil unto any man. To render means to give off or to give back. In tennis, it's returning the serve. So it comes over to you, that sin comes over to you, and to render it back means here you go. Here's that thing that you did to me. I'm giving it right back to you. So when someone gossips about you, you want to start a rumor about them. You want to say, oh yeah? Well, if you only knew what I knew about them, you wouldn't believe what they had to say. When there's a neighbor who's being loud, we just say, well, if you're going to be loud, I'll show you noise. I'll show you what it's like to have an irritating neighbor. When the boss chews you out, you want to just kind of undermine him or talk bad about him. And when everyone else is joining in, you want to join in too. Oh, yeah, I can't believe that guy, whatever it is. When the cashier is rude, you be rude back to them or go talk to their manager. Christ calls us not to retaliate. He calls us when someone gossips about us to not start a rumor about them. When our neighbor is being loud, not to yell at them, but to show them love and kindness, not to serve it back to them. When their boss chews us out, to not have a bad attitude about what happened. When the cashier is rude, not to be rude back to them, but to be kind and gentle. Why is it that we want to get back at people? I can think of a few reasons why it's so easy when we're sinned against to want to sin back. Part of it is the sense of justice that we all have. We somehow are convinced that if they sin against me and I give it back to them, then all of a sudden we're balanced. It's like the universe is now right where it needs to be because they sinned against me and I give it back to them and now we're even. You've even heard that with kids, right? Kids fight and fight and fight and they just want to be even. And part of the reason that they keep fighting is they're looking for this now we're even where someone quits. And that's just not the way the world works. It's true that the sense of justice that we have makes us want to make things even, but that is not the Christ way. There's no way to get even. Part of the reason that we want to get back at people is we hope that they won't do it again. If they sin against us and we render it back to them, we're hoping that maybe they'll say, oh man, that really hurt. That's what I did to you? Oh, I'll make sure I never do that again. But again, has your experience been that that's the way it goes? No. No, you sin against them, and they've contextualized what you've done to them as much worse than what they did to you. And so it escalates. It never works. We're angry. I think part of the reason that we're going to get back at people is we're angry. It gives us an excuse to be mean or evil. They started it, but I'm going to finish it. Proverbs 24, verse 29 says, "Say not, I will do so to him as he hath done to me. I will render to the man according to his work." It was a lot of work for Amy and I to teach our children that the golden rule is not do unto them as they did to you. It is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's a very different thing, and kids need reminders. It's not retaliate. It is to love and forgive. Now, why is it wrong to render evil for evil? One, it shows a petty spirit that's given to anger. It shows a mindset that is not willing to give up on something generally pretty small. Two, it shows a heart that does not trust God to take care of it. We'll look at passages later, but God offers to take care of the problems when we're sinned against. And when I say, no, I got it, we're saying, I don't trust that things are going to be even. I'm going to get the desired result if I don't take these affairs into my hands. It shows that you don't really trust God. And you don't maybe put it in those terms, but that's exactly what's going on. I don't believe you, God, when you say that you'll take care of it. I'll take care of this myself. Why? It's wrong because it cannot be a way to live. That idea of if they sin against me, I sin against them, that is only designed to destroy. You cannot thrive in that way. Samuel Johnson, in his commentary, said it would soon destroy all the order of society and deform life with violence and ravage as a permission to everyone to judge his own cause and to apportion his own recompense for imagined injuries. Now, you might ask, does that mean that we can't ever defend ourselves? No, I think sometimes it is okay. There are times to run, there are times to hide, and there's even times to fight. I understand that. I'm not saying you can't defend yourself physically, right? And sometimes if someone starts a rumor about you, you can, in some cases, again, defend yourself, but in doing so, to be careful to not sin yourself to try to impugn the other person's character or to sin against them in coming back. Barnes said this in his commentary: "It may be right to defend our lives and the lives of our friends, to seek the protection of the law for our persons, reputation, or property against those who would wrong us, to repel the assaults of calumniators and slanderers, but in no case should the motive be to do them wrong for the evil which they have done to us." Simply, it is not Christian to retaliate. That is not Christ's way. Adam Clark said, "A peevish, fretful, vindictive man may be a child of Satan, but certainly not a child of God." The Cambridge Bible in the comments said, "It is a reproach to all, a discredit to the common faith when a Christian gives back wrong for wrong." Now, this is a uniquely Christian aspect because most religions, most places in the world, most worldviews and philosophies in the world don't have this idea of giving up when we're wronged. Most have an idea, again, of balance or justice, and you do to them. It is uniquely Christian. The Pulpit Commentary said, "Forgiveness of our enemies is preeminently a Christian virtue. It had no place in the morality of the heathen. The utmost they could attain was, 'Thou shalt love all men except those who have wronged thee.'" Preacher's commentary said, retaliation betrays a weak, ignoble, and cruel disposition. Pagan morality went so far as to forbid only the unprovoked injuring of others, and it is not without noble examples of the exercise of a spirit of forgiveness. It is Christianity alone that teaches man to bear personal injuries without retaliation. It is not Christian to retaliate. It's the basis of not doing evil is God. And as we reflect God's heart, we understand, then that means no matter what, we're not going to. I mentioned the golden rule earlier. Here it is in Luke chapter 6, verses 35 and 36. But love ye your enemies and do good and lend, hoping for nothing again, and your reward shall be great, and ye shall be the children of the highest, for he is kind unto the unthankful and to the evil. Be ye therefore merciful, as your Father also is merciful. Love your enemies, do good, hoping for nothing again. Your reward shall be great. You'll be called the children of the highest. Isn't it true that God is kind to the unthankful and the evil? Isn't it true that God is merciful to those who don't deserve mercy? And aren't you glad for it? Aren't you glad that God doesn't treat us the way that we treat him? If God treated us only one time for every 1,000 times we sin against him, we would all be lost. So we as Christians ought to reflect the character of God. Now there's the example of not doing evil when evil was done is Jesus Christ. Over in 1 Peter chapter 3, I'm preaching through 1 Peter on the radio. 1 Peter 3, at the end of the chapter, he says, the like figure wherein, chapter 2, for even hereunto you were called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow his steps, who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth, who when he was reviled not again. When he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him that judgeth righteously, who his own self bare our sins in his own body on the tree, that we, being dead to sins, should live unto righteousness, by whose stripes ye were healed. For ye were as sheep going astray, but now are returned unto the shepherd and bishop of your souls. Jesus Christ saw good coming from evil, and so committed himself to God, and did not fight it, but accepted God's will, even in the things he suffered. Now, what should we do instead? Well, we ought to wait on the Lord. Proverbs 20, verse 22 says, say not thou, I will recompense, but wait on the Lord, and he shall save thee. Again, to say, I'll take care of this, is to say, I don't really want to wait on the Lord. I don't believe him. We ought to allow God to take vengeance. Romans 12, verse 19, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. What you can do is to allow God to work in hearts and to change minds, and to change hearts. Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 and 39, ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And then finally, to not rejoice when God does work and get vengeance. There have been times that I'm like, I'm not going to get revenge. I'm going to let the Lord handle this. And then when he does, I kind of secretly congratulate myself. See, I was in the right and they were in the wrong. And then the Lord has to rebuke me there and say that is also not the heart of Christ. You did good in the first part of letting me handle it, but now you can't gloat over someone else's problem, what happened to them. Proverbs 24, verses 17 and 18. Rejoice not when thine enemy falleth, and let not thine heart be glad when he stumbleth, lest the Lord see it and it displease him, and he turn away his wrath from him. What a wonderful thing to be able to go, okay, Lord, I'm not going to do something, to when the Lord does something, to say, oh, Lord, would you please show mercy to them? We all agree that is the standard. We just don't know how to get there. I think the heart of Christ will get us there. I think surrendering that, at least at the first, to say, Lord, I'm going to let the consequences of this and how this plays out, I'm going to leave that all up to you, and you do with this whatever you want. I'm giving up all my rights to anything, and I just want good from this. That is what Christ calls us to not render evil for evil, to not retaliate. And then there's a second part, and that is to follow that which is good. Notice he says in verse 15, see that none render evil for evil unto any man, but ever follow that which is good, both among yourselves and to all men. Again, in the church, outside the church. In any situation, we are to do good. And even more when evil has happened to us, when we have been wronged, when we have been sinned against. that is an even more reason to do good. That is when we should not do less good, but more good. That is so hard. That is so hard because that's the time exactly we feel like, well, good grief, I did all this good and this is what happened to me. I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm not going to sin, but I'm just not going to do all the good things that I could do. And he says, follow that which is good. How about I just not do the bad thing? Yes, that's the first part of the verse. The second part is to ever follow that which is good. We found out where good is, he says, and chase it. The word here is follow, which is the same word used for persecutors. When Paul was chasing people, that word chase means to follow, pursue, persecute. That's the same idea, that just the same zeal that people had for Christians to go get them, that's what we should be doing with good. Oh, there's good. Let's go after it. That's the idea. We find out where good is and we chase it. We follow after it. Hybert, again in his commentary, said this: the present tense imperative follow after indicates that what is now demanded will not come naturally and without effort. It is a goal that must be continually and earnestly pursued, like a hunter persistently stalking his prey. Although their enemies are persecuting them, they must continue to pursue that which will be beneficial to their persecutors. All right, Pastor, I could do the first part. I could just say, okay, I won't do anything wrong. But this is much more than I'm really willing to sign up for. And this is what makes it Christian, that there's a supernatural love, a supernatural mindset about when we are wronged. And you're right that you can't, but Jesus Christ in you can. And so it's not an impossible ask, just a hard one. Just a hard one for us. Notice he says, follow that which is good. And the word good just means beneficial. It doesn't even mean moral good. It means the kind of good that helps and benefits others. That means others in our church, others who have persecuted us, other believers who are struggling, even to Christ. Now, what does this mean to those who do evil? So if we're supposed to follow after good to them who do evil against us, what does that mean? Let me give you 4 things. 1, to love those who do evil to us. And again, in Matthew chapter 5, verses 44 and 45, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. Leviticus 19, verse 18, thou shalt not avenge, nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord. To love those who do evil to us. That's a tall ask because, again, I can tolerate them. If God said, just forget about them, I'd be like, okay, I can do that. He didn't. No, put them at the top of your prayer list and love them. Even the ones, and especially the ones who sinned against you. Number 2, to bless and pray for those who do evil to us. Romans 12, verse 14, bless them which persecute you, bless and curse not. Again, if he just said, don't curse, I'd be like, okay, I won't. But he says, bless and curse not. That's tough, to pray for them in that way. 1 Peter 3, verses 18 and 19, for Christ also hath once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit, by which also he went and preached unto the spirits in prison. That's what Christ did for us. He blessed and prayed for those who persecuted him. 3 is to do good to those who do evil to us. Proverbs 25, verses 21 through 22, if thine enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat, and if he be thirsty, give him water to drink. For thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head, and the Lord shall reward thee. Again, back to Romans 12, verses 20 and 21. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. I heard a preacher, and I wish, I'm trying to get better at saying where I got, different sources, things like that. I wish I could remember who said this, but it stuck with me, and I think it's really good. It's somewhat cynical, but here, you'll understand what it is. So he talked about the idea of praying for your enemies. And he said, who better than you knows their faults enough to pray for them? Right? When you think about praying for your friends, you don't generally think about praying for all the horrible things about them. Like we all know our friends well enough to know that they have their quirks. They have their things that you just kind of like, whatever. We're still friends. That's just a little part of kind of who they are. And we are much more likely to overlook that. But if your friend had an enemy, you know that they know all those things that they don't like about your friend. And so here's the thing. If you have an enemy, if there's someone you know all their bad faults, you're more suited to pray for them than anybody else because you know what God needs to do in their own heart. I don't think it's a prideful thing to pray for your enemies. To pray for the people that you know their faults. Because God tells us to do that. I think the reason that God has allowed that enemy to be in your life is so that you can pray for them. And so you can ask God to do good for them and ask God to change them. Because they're friends, maybe they're evil too. They're not going to be praying for them. You have an opportunity to do that. Now, that's a very, very hard thing to ask. And that's why Christ gives us his Spirit to help us do it. Now you say, how can I do this? This is way beyond anything I'm able to do. To love, bless, forgive, care for those who have done me wrong. The number one answer is that you're absolutely right, you can't. You need a new heart. But that new heart is one that loves enemies. That new heart is one that is willing to forego self and forego what we want for the glory and honor of the Lord Jesus Christ, like we talked about this morning. If you want to glorify God more than anything else, more than justice, more than seeing that person get theirs, more than making it so that everyone knows you're right and they were wrong, well, if you're going to pursue that, and that's your heart, then the other things are not going to matter as much. You can do it through surrender to Christ. Again, we can't, but he can. And it's a good thing when you feel that those bitter thoughts, which we all have. The Lord really had to deliver me from bitterness against people that I really should have loved, and in some ways do, but it was a really hard thing for God to break down and show me I was bitter. First of all, I didn't agree with God that I was bitter. And then the more I prayed about it, the more I realized, you're right, I'm really bitter. I'm really bitter. And then the next part was, yeah, but I have reason to be bitter, right? Yeah, sure. Yeah, you got all kinds of reasons to be bitter. And yet God doesn't call us to be bitter in reason. He calls us to love outside of our reason. So I really had to give it to the Lord and say, all right, Lord, I know, I agree with you, I'm bitter. And I agree with you that I shouldn't be, but I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to just not feel this way anymore. I don't know how to not get angry every time I think about them. So you're going to have to take this. And again, I don't care at all if I sound like a broken record. When you will at least surrender that to the Lord and say, here it is, I can't. You surrender it, he takes it. It's a supernatural thing I cannot explain, except that's the way Christ works. If your hands are on it, he can't take it. But if you're open-handed and you say, God, it's yours. I can't do this. I cannot forgive. I cannot love. He will. You've maybe heard the story of Corrie ten Boom, who was her husband or her family, her father hid Jews in, I think it was Denmark, during World War II, and was found and was put into a concentration camp because of it. And while there, was humiliated, especially by one of the German guards. And to the point, throughout that she just had a visible reaction to the abuse from this guard. And in the process of being in the concentration camp, her sister died. And that just added to the trauma of that whole experience. Corrie ten Boom was released, of course, from the concentration camps and was out in the world and was asked to speak at different events and things. And there was one where she talked about having to forgive the Germans for what they did generally. And she tells the story of after the show, a man coming up to her and saying, Fraulein, you were in this particular concentration camp, so was I. And then in that moment, she recognized this guard. He said, I've come to know Jesus Christ like you have, and I want to know if you'll forgive me. Now, he didn't remember her, but she remembered him. And here he was with his hand sticking out, asking for forgiveness. And Corrie ten Boom says, I could not. And she, in her writing, told the Lord, like had a battle with the Lord, I can't do this. Not just like I don't want to, but I can't. And in the moment, she said, I can't, but if you'll do it through me, I'll love him. And involuntarily almost reached out her hand and took it. And when she took his hand, felt the peace and love and forgiveness, not of her, but of Christ flowing through her to this man. Because she was willing to give that up. She was willing to give up that bitterness and say, I can't, but you can. It's a wonderful story about what Christ can do through us if we will admit we don't have the ability to do what he's calling us to do. It's true that we can just white knuckle it. We can think, well, if it were me, I would want to be forgiven. And that's true. We love forgiveness when it comes to others, and we love when other people will forgive us for our sins. We should want that, of course, for others in our own hearts. But it's not about whether the person's worth forgiving or not. It's whether Christ is worth worshiping in your forgiveness and in your love for them, the ones who have done you wrong. Now, it also means that we would do good to other Christians, because he says, and both among yourselves and to all men. Christians should not sin, period. No matter the circumstances, no matter no matter what happened that brought you to this temptation, any sin is a violation of God's holiness, and Christians can never sin. If we are offended, we're called to reach out to them. To either in Matthew chapter 5, if you remember that you did something to somebody else, you leave your gift at the altar, go and make it right and come back. Or in Matthew 18, if your brother is trespassed against you, you would go and talk to them. But the heart of the Christian is reconciliation. Again, where it can be had. You can't always have reconciliation. I understand that. Like we said in Romans 12, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. But God does call us in those moments of conflict to not retaliate and to follow that which is good. Now, what will happen if we do this? I think, first of all, we'll have growth in our lives, in our church. We'll have deeper relationships. I believe the Lord has blessed me when I have forgiven others, when I've let go of the bitterness that feels sometimes so sweet to hang on to. Those grudges just have a wonderful feel to them when you carry them around, but they get heavy after a while. But when you give that up, I'm convinced that I wouldn't be closer to the Lord. I wouldn't know more about his forgiveness. I wouldn't appreciate his mercy as much if I hadn't been brought to the point where I had to forgive others and love others and not retaliate against them first. We'll have growth. We'll also have protection. You decide, nope, I'm sorry, but this person needs to learn their lesson. I'm going to retaliate instead of follow that which is good. Then you are taking yourself out of the protection of God. Not that he doesn't care about you, but he's going to let some circumstances and consequences happen because you refuse to do it his way. And he says, let's find out how this goes for you. It won't go well. It is a wonderful thing to trust God enough to say, I feel very vulnerable by not doing something about this, but I'll put myself under your shelter and protection and let you handle this. Hate is a cancer that will eat at us. We are called to learn, to love, to forgive, and to pursue good. I didn't tell you anything new tonight. I didn't tell you anything that you haven't heard already, probably in Sunday school from when you were very little. But here it is now, putting it in your lap, either today or for weeks, months, years to come, hopefully looking back to this verse and saying, there's the standard. If the Amish can do it, Amish who, by and large, don't know the gospel, are not changed by the Holy Spirit of Christ and new flesh in their hearts. But if they can get that right, we can too, I think. God, help us, please, to understand more of what this means, to not retaliate, to not get back at those who have sinned against us, but to follow that which is good. Help us to be so supernaturally forgiving and loving and good pursuers that others would be shocked and surprised by the love that we have for them, just like so many were about this Amish school. Help us, Lord, to reflect Christ in better and greater ways. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.